Good morning. I'm Bishop George Floyd. I am the president of the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance, and we are so grateful to have you with us today. We need to talk about some things that are affecting us, not just locally, but nationally. And so we find ourselves in a position that we have another death by police officers with another black man. Echoing the same sentiments of the words, I can't breathe. So I'm so happy to have standing here with me today. We've got Pastor Topaz McBride, which is over our social justice department, as well as we've got Pastor Eric, which is also over at Aurora, Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance branch. We've got Pastor Mark Davis is with us, the Absolute Word Church. We also have the Reverend Patrick Demmer, and that he is over our public relations for the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance. And then we also have my good friend, Pastor Michael Gatewood, and he is here for community affairs for the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance, as well as the Pastor David Whitmore, which is our media. We're so grateful that we have all of them here. I'm going to allow for the opening that our public relations Vice President Patrick Demmer would come and speak to us today.
Good morning. I want to address my comments this morning from the thought when lessons from history are not learned. Because today marks another sad occasion in which lessons of yesterday are yet unlearned today. The murder of Frank Tyson, though it was not in Colorado, but in Canton, Ohio, is a painful reminder to us as a ministerial alliance of black clergy leaders that we must remain diligent in our concern for civil rights, equality, and justice. The murder of Mr. Tyson is too reminiscent of the murder of George Floyd, the black gentleman in Minnesota that begged for his life while a white police officer kneed him to death. Mr. Tyson, like George Floyd, can be heard begging for his life. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. It's ugly situations like these that are relived from state to state at the hands of police officers who, with a tremendous mindset of impunity that is ever so bothering and horrifying to us. I'm yet bothered by my memories of seeing Paul Child's lifeless body being carried out from his home just the day after the 4th of July, right down the street from the church that I pastored in Park Hill. Paul was developmentally delayed, and with accompanying officers was right there with less lethal force weapons, and yet one officer decided, I'm going to shoot him, and he killed him. And that came just 30 days prior to that. He also shot and killed a young man that was deaf, a black man, a black boy, wasn't even really a man, that was deaf 30 days before he killed Paul Child. The very next month, I stood with faith and community leaders to denounce the murder of Ishmael Mina, an immigrant who was killed in our city in Denver by again the police, but this time the killing occurred during a no-knock raid that went to the wrong house. I stood with Latino faith leaders outside the housing complex of Frank Lobato, who was shot and killed by police while he was laying in bed drinking a soda. They thought it was a gun. Fast forward to more recent horrifying deaths at the hands of law enforcement. I was horrified by the video of Marvin Booker being gang-style murdered in our local Denver jail. I stood with this alliance as we protested the murder of Elijah McClain, who was killed in Aurora by police. Well, the list can go on and on and on of those who have died at the hands of law enforcement. But how many more Frank Tysons must die before Congress passed and the president signed into law the George Floyd justice in policing legislation? We're here because we want to be proactive. No, nothing has happened lately, but if we don't learn from the lessons of yesterday, tomorrow will be here too soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Relations Vice President. I'm going to ask that Pastor Topaz McBride would come that represents social justice for the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance.
Good morning. In a time when there's so much divisiveness in this nation, primarily at the root of that divisiveness is the racism. And the racism that continues to be displayed by officers who have been commissioned to serve and protect after there has been allegedly so much work put into changing the trajectory so that communities can feel safe and trust the officers who have come to allegedly protect them. How will we ever get to that place of accomplishing that if indeed we are still seeing our unarmed brothers and sisters being either brutalized or beat to death or murdered by either gun violence, a knee, or a fist? This is not acceptable. We are not making the strides in Denver or Aurora that we should be making. At this time, just as recently as Monday, in City Council in Aurora, City Council person called for the resignation of the Chief of Police. Here we have gone through, we have been in 4 different chiefs of police for the City of Aurora since 2022. The one chief that had finally made groundbreaking efforts to begin to make some strides to give evidence of the fact that there was intentional work being done to address the divisiveness, to address the injustices, to address the violence and the inhumane behavior and activity of those officers. That particular chief officer was called to resign. Now we are in another situation where an officer is being called to resign. The officers who seem to be doing the work to clean up the department of the officers who are not doing the work continue to be called on the carpet. The person who's calling for the resignation of the current chief of police in Aurora is one of the same persons who rallied the resistance against the initial chief. So how will we ever get to a place to where we can begin to work together as communities if we cannot get past the very things that continue to cause distrust and destruction? Denver is also at a place where just as recent as this weekend, we saw officers not taking the time to use any sensitivity to respond to students who were protesting on the Auraria campus. We saw that around the nation. As officers are not taking the time to respond to nonviolent protests, to unarmed students, it's no wonder that black drivers, black persons driving a vehicle are still traumatized and paranoid and they panic whenever lights show up behind them. Will I make it through this traffic stop? We have to come to a point to where we can begin to teach our children to respect and not react when an officer shows up. We're not at that place yet. to experience divide in our communities, and that's not what we want. We want to be able to honor and respect the officers, but we need them to respect us as well, and not just our officers, but all of our lawmakers from the top all the way down. Thank you.
Next we will have Pastor Eric Nelson. He is Vice President of the Aurora chapter for the Greater Metro River Ministerial Alliance.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, community and members. We are yet here again to address this issue that plagues our community. Every time it comes to law enforcement, another black man, another black woman, another black youth is killed. I am saddened and I am deeply hurt by it. So I took a few notes to make sure my points are very clear. These incidents have caused deep wounds within our black and brown communities. And it's imperative that we take decisive action to address and rectify this systematic problem. How many more black males, black women, black youth are going to die by the hands of law enforcement? First and foremost, let me express my sincere condolences to the families and the loved ones of those who have lost their lives in this heartbreaking circumstance. As it relates to this, Brother Frank Tyson. Their lives matter, and their death should have not occurred. We must work together to ensure that such tragedies are never repeated. It is very clear that we need to reimagine our police departments to better serve and protect all members of our community, especially African Americans who have been disproportionately impacted by police violence. This reimagining involves fundamental shifts in how law enforcement operates, with a focus on building trust, accountability, and transparency. One key aspect of this reimagining process is community engagement. Police departments must actively involve community members in the decision-making process, policy development, and oversight mechanisms. This ensures that the needs and the concerns of the community are heard and addressed, leading to more effective and responsive policing. We also need to invest in training and education of law enforcement officers to promote the de-escalation techniques, implicit bias awareness, and cultural sensitivity. By equipping officers with the tools and the knowledge to interact respectfully and effectively with all individuals, we can reduce the likelihood of violent encounters and promote positive relationships between police and the community. Furthermore, accountability is paramount. We must hold law enforcement officers accountable for their actions, especially in cases of misconduct or excessive use of force. This includes implementing a robust civilian oversight mechanism, enhancing disciplinary procedures, and promoting transparency, investigation of police-involved incidents. Now, as I proceed to close, I want to make this very clear. I have very close friends and family members that are members of law enforcement. The shootings of African Americans by police are grave injustices, and it demands our urgent attention and action. By reimagining our police departments to support and protect all members of our community, we can work together towards a better future, where every individual is treated with dignity, respect, and fairness for all. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from our Vice President of Community Affairs, and that is Pastor Michael Gatewood.
So on this occasion is a sad occasion, but we want to be proactive here in Denver, Colorado. The death of Frank Tyson. The news did not travel expediently like it did when the other young man was killed and murdered by the police, George Floyd. But even though those situations didn't happen, the Ministerial Alliance is still proactive to the point where we want the community to know that we are here to support the community when these things happen foreign and that's in our land or not in another city or another state. But I want you to know that we are here to be our concerned with the de-escalation process of the Denver Sheriff's Department, the Denver Police Department, and the world. Right now, there's people that have communicational differences between the police department and the community affairs. My job is to ease these tensions between the community and law enforcement, and we are going to be diligently working together to make this happen. We look forward to having this engagement and conversations with law enforcement in the future, and that's all I have right now at this time. Thank you.
We have also with us from the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance, Pastor David Whitmore, that takes care of all media aspects.
I'm going to be very brief. If I, as a black man, have to teach my teenage son to control his emotion as he's growing up when he encounters police officers, how much more should our government be able to train and vet the police officers that they put on the street?
Thank you. I just want to close by talking a little bit about qualified immunity. One of the things that we see in this George Floyd bill that's so important that it deals with qualified immunity. It's not enough just to say we're going to deal with chokeholds, and we're going to deal with the way people are restrained. But we have to talk about qualified immunity, because qualified immunity is basically given for policemen to be able actually to escape the things that they are committing, especially when it comes to the only people that seem to be at the end of murder is black men. The problem with qualified immunity and the way it is written, even here in Colorado and across the nation, is that it is totally up to the officer's perception that says, I believe that you are a danger to society. So many times we've seen black men that are running away with their hands up saying, don't shoot, are still shot in the back. And qualified immunity says that police officer has the right to use his own discretion to say, I believe that this man is going to be basically a menace to society or dangerous to the community, therefore I take his life. We did not go far enough with the bill for qualified immunity, and even if found guilty, they don't pay no more than up to $25,000 fine for taking a life. And that we're here to say we must push, we must promote, we must come together. We need Congress to hear us. We need the House to hear us, the Senate to hear us. We know that the House heard and the House passed the bill. But when it got to the Senate shot the bill down. It's very important that we come together and say we got to go back in. And I'm talking now even in Colorado. I'm talking to even right now the people that are down at the House and the Senate. We need to go back. Those lawmakers, those that wrote the bill, we've got to go back in. We've got to make some amendments to that bill that goes further when it comes to say. Otherwise, the things that we've talked about here today don't mean nothing if we're not going to change laws. As long as the law says it's all right to kill, and I'm going to say it, basically black people, there's an issue with qualified immunity. I want to talk briefly about what happened with Frank Tyson and the officer that ended up killing him. If you watch the tape, you'll find out that officer had his knee on his back. And that takes us right back to George Floyd. That takes us right back to Eric Garner. Eric Garner said the same thing with a chokehold. I can't breathe. They killed him. George Floyd had a knee in his neck. He said, I can't breathe. He actually said, I'm dying. And the man killed him. And here we are again with Frank Tyson. Here we are again with a man saying, you got your knee in my back, I can't breathe. 7 times. 7 times he said, I can't breathe. And then they killed the man and want to turn him over and now try to resuscitate him after he's dead. This is an issue. The biggest issue to me is the officer that told him, shut the F up. You told a man to shut the F up. And you are a police officer, and this man dies. We've got to go in. We've got to deal with reimagining. We've got to deal with reform. We've got to go in, but most of all, we have to deal with accountability. We've got to deal with accountability. Therefore, that's why we're here with the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance, and we're speaking for community, we're speaking for community needs, and we're saying we're joining across the nation. And we want to say it again, we must pass the George Floyd bill. Thank you.
Hey, Paul. How you doing, man? I understand. How's the best?
It's going good. I'm not too bad.